They said he had a heart of ice, a man who married the most beautiful woman in England, only to lock her away in the country like a forgotten heirloom. For 5 years, the Duke of Ashford didn't just ignore his Duchess, he erased her. He lived as a bachelor in London, while she withered in silence. But arrogance is a brittle shield. On the night of the midwinter ball, in front of the entire aristocracy, the Duke didn't fall because of a bullet or a blade. He fell because the woman he despised bowed to another man with a smile he had never seen. And when his heart stopped, the real story began. London, November 1884. The rain in London did not wash the city clean. It merely pressed the soot deeper into the cobblestones. Inside the master study of Ashford House, the air was dry, smelling of expensive tobacco and old leather. Sebastian St. Clair. The 9th Duke of Ashford stared at the letter on his mahogany desk as if it were a declaration of war. It was in a sense. It was from his grandmother, the Dowager Duchess Beatrice, a woman who terrified prime ministers and bishops alike. The season begins in a fortnight, Sebastian. You have humiliated the family long enough with your bachelor antics, while your wife rots in Yorkshire. Bring Isolde to London. Present her, or I shall cut your allowance for the racing stables to a pittance. Sebastian crumpled the thick parchment in his hand. Isolde. Even the name felt foreign on his tongue, like a word from a language he had studied once and forgotten. He had married Lady Isolde Sterling 5 years ago. It had been a transaction cold and sharp. His father had gambled away a fortune. Her father, the Earl of Kensington, had new money from ironworks, but needed an old title for his daughter. The contract was signed. The wedding was held, and on their wedding night, Sebastian had walked into her bedchamber, looked at the trembling 18-year-old girl sitting on the edge of the bed in high-necked lace, and felt a wave of revulsion, not for her specifically, but for the trap. He was 22, wild, and in love with a dancer named Clara. Being chained to this pale, silent creature felt like a death sentence. "I will not touch you," he had told her, then his voice stripping the color from her cheeks. "You have the title. Your father has his connection. Stay out of my way, and I shall stay out of yours." The next morning, he sent her to the country estate, Blackwood Hall. He hadn't seen her since. "Simmons," Sebastian barked, tossing the crumpled letter into the fire. His butler materialized from the shadows. "Your Grace, send a telegram to Blackwood. Tell her Grace to prepare for travel. She is to come to London immediately." "Very good, sir. Shall I prepare the blue suite for her?" Sebastian paused, pouring himself a glass of brandy. He tried to remember what she looked like. Brown hair, blue eyes. He couldn't recall. "No. Put her in the East Wing. It's far enough away from my quarters that I won't have to hear her weeping." Yorkshire, Blackwood Hall. 300 miles north, the wind howled across the moors, rattling the window panes of the library. But inside it was warm. Isolde St. Clair sat in a high-backed velvet chair, a heavy book resting on her knees. She was no longer the trembling girl of 18. At 23, the isolation of Blackwood had not broken her. It had forged her. "My lady." Isolde looked up. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper who had become more of a mother to her than her own ever was, stood in the doorway clutching a yellow telegram slip. Her face was pale. Isolde closed the book, a treatise on agricultural reform. "What is it? Martha has the river flooded again?" "No, my lamb." Mrs. Gable walked forward, her hands shaking. "It's from London. From him." The room went silent. The fire popped a sharp sound in the stillness. Isolde took the slip of paper. Her fingers did not tremble. She read the terse command. Attend London. Season. Immediate. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried over Sebastian St. Clair since the 3rd month of her marriage, when she realized no letter was coming. "He wants his puppet back on the stage," Isolde said softly. Her voice was lower now, husky and rich, shaped by days reading poetry aloud to the empty halls. "You don't have to go," Mrs. Gable said fiercely. "We can say you're ill. Dr. Whittaker would sign the paper." Isolde stood up. She was tall, slender, but strong, her figure filled out from long walks on the heath. She walked to the window, looking out at the grey, unforgiving landscape she had come to love. "No," Isolde said. "If I hide, I am the child he remembers. If I go—" She turned, and for the first time there was a glint of steel in her hazel eyes. "If I go as a stranger. He thinks he is summoning a ghost, Martha. He is about to meet the woman he created." She looked at the reflection in the glass. She wasn't the mouse anymore. She was the Duchess of Ashford, and she controlled the accounts of this estate better than his steward. She had funded the local school, rebuilt the tenant farmers' cottages, and secretly invested in the very railways Sebastian ignored. "Pack the grey silk," Isolde commanded, "and the red velvet, the one with the low neckline." Mrs. Gable gasped. "My lady, that is daring." Isolde smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am done being invisible to you." London. 1 week later. The carriage ride had been grueling, but Isolde refused to show fatigue as the brougham pulled up to the imposing limestone facade of Ashford House. It was raining again. The footman rushed to open the door. Isolde stepped out, ignoring the hand offered by the young groom. She swept up the stairs, her heavy travelling cloak billowing behind her. In the foyer, the staff was lined up. They looked nervous. They expected the shy, weeping girl from 5 years ago. Isolde pulled off her gloves, handing them to a stunned maid without looking at her. "Where is the Duke?" she asked. Her tone was polite, but it carried the weight of authority. In the drawing room, Your Grace," the butler stammered. "He is entertaining guests." "Excellent." Isolde didn't wait to be announced. She walked to the double doors and pushed them open. The drawing room was filled with smoke and laughter. Sebastian was there, lounging on a sofa, a glass of whiskey in one hand, a cigar in the other. He was surrounded by his court, a group of dissolute lords, and a few women of questionable reputation. They were laughing at a joke he had just made. And so I said, "Why buy the cow when the milk is sour?" Sebastian chuckled. The laughter died instantly as the doors swung open. Sebastian looked up, annoyed at the interruption. He saw a woman standing in the doorway. She was wearing a travelling dress of slate grey, tailored to perfection, hugging a figure that was undeniably womanly. Her hair was swept up in a severe, elegant chignon, revealing a long, graceful neck. Her face was striking high cheekbones, a straight nose, and eyes that assessed the room with a terrifying calmness. He didn't recognize her. "I apologize," Sebastian drawled, standing up his charm automatic. "I believe you have the wrong address, madame. This is Ashford House." The woman didn't blink. She walked further into the room, the crowd parting for her. She stopped 3 feet from him. The scent of rain and violets hit him, a cool, clean smell that cut through the stale smoke. "I'm aware of the address, Sebastian," she said. The glass slipped from Sebastian's fingers. It shattered on the floor, splashing amber liquid onto his polished boots. "Isolde," he whispered. The room erupted in whispers. This was the mouse. This was the unwanted bride. "I received your summons," she said, looking at the shattered glass with mild distaste. "Though I see you were not prepared for my arrival. You may wish to clean this up before the stain sets." She turned to the butler who was hovering in the hallway. "Have my trunks sent to the east wing, and inform the cook I will take tea in my room. I do not wish to be disturbed." She turned back to Sebastian. He was staring at her, his mouth slightly open, his mind unable to reconcile the memory of the sobbing girl with this ice queen. "We will discuss the schedule for the season tomorrow," she said dismissively. "Good evening, gentlemen. Ladies." With a slight nod, Regal barely there, she turned and walked out. Sebastian stood frozen. His heart was hammering a strange rhythm against his ribs. He felt a sudden irrational spike of anger. How dare she? How dare she look like that? How dare she speak to him as if he were a servant? "Well," chuckled Lord Galloway, one of his cruder friends, "it seems the little mouse has grown claws, Ashford, and fine ones at that." "Get out," Sebastian growled. "What? Everyone, get out!" As the room cleared, Sebastian stared at the empty doorway. He had expected a burden. Instead, he had been handed a mystery. And for the first time in 5 years, the Duke of Ashford was intrigued. The following weeks were a battle of silence. They lived in the same house, but moved like celestial bodies in different orbits. They met only at dinner, where the conversation was polite and excruciating. Sebastian tried to bait her. He brought up the country, mocking its dullness. She countered with dry wit about the vapidity of the city. He tried to flaunt his late nights. She merely asked if he required a headache powder in the morning. He found himself watching her. He watched the way her hands moved when she poured tea. He watched the way the light caught the gold in her hazel eyes. He was confusing irritation with attraction, and it made him furious. Then came the night of the midwinter ball. It was the premier event of the season, hosted by the Duchess of Manchester. Everyone who mattered would be there. Sebastian waited in the foyer, checking his pocket watch. "If she is late, I am leaving without her," he muttered to Simmons. "I am here." Sebastian turned and felt the air leave his lungs. Isolde stood at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a gown of deep midnight blue velvet that left her shoulders bare. The bodice was encrusted with small sapphires that shimmered like stars, but it was her face that captivated him. She wore no rouge, for the cold air had flushed her cheeks, and her eyes were bright, almost feverish. She descended the stairs, the silk rustling like a whisper. "You look—" Sebastian cleared his throat, struggling to find a word that wasn't devastating. "Acceptable." Isolde's lip curled slightly. "High praise, Your Grace." "Shall we go?" The carriage ride was silent. Sebastian sat opposite her, overwhelmed by her proximity. He wanted to reach out and touch the velvet of her glove. He wanted to shake her and ask where the shy girl had gone. He wanted to kiss her. The thought horrified him. When they entered the ballroom, the hush was immediate. The cold Duke and his ghost bride. All eyes were on them. Sebastian offered his arm. Isolde took it, her touch light, impersonal. They walked the gauntlet. Sebastian felt a surge of possessive pride. Yes, look at her. She is mine. But she wasn't, and he was about to find out just how far away she really was. They danced the first waltz. It was technically perfect, emotionally barren. "You dance well," Sebastian murmured, pulling her slightly closer than propriety allowed. "I practice with a chair in the library," she said flatly. "It leads better." Sebastian stiffened. He released her the moment the music ended and retreated to the sidelines, grabbing a glass of champagne, his mood blackening. He watched her from across the room. She was polite, distant, deflecting the advances of other men with cool indifference. Then the doors opened. A stir went through the crowd. A man entered. He was not dressed in the standard black evening wear, but in a dark military dress uniform, though he carried no sword. He was older, perhaps 40, with greying temples and a face etched with kindness and sorrow. It was Sir Johnny Vane, a renowned surgeon recently knighted by the Queen for his work in the Crimea, and a man known for his disdain of high society. Sebastian watched, bored, as the man scanned the room. Then the man's eyes locked on Isolde. And Isolde. Sebastian saw the glass in her hand tremble. He saw the mask of ice shatter. Her entire face transformed. A radiant, heartbreaking smile broke across her lips. A smile so full of warmth, of intimacy, of sheer relief, that it felt like a physical blow to Sebastian's gut. She didn't wait for him to approach. She stepped away from the circle of countesses she was speaking with. She walked toward Sir Johnny. And then in the center of the ballroom, the Duchess of Ashford stopped. She didn't offer her hand to be kissed. She bowed. It was not a curtsy of protocol. It was a deep, reverent bow head, bent low, a gesture of profound submission and gratitude. It was the way one bowed to a king or a savior. The room gasped. A duchess bowing to a surgeon. Sir Johnny reached out, bypassing all etiquette, and took her hands, pulling her up. He said something to her, his expression intense, worried. Isolde looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes, and nodded frantically. She clutched his hands as if he were her lifeline. Sebastian's vision blurred. A roaring sound filled his ears. She never smiled at me like that. She never looked at me like that. Jealousy, hot and toxic, flooded his veins. But beneath it was something else, panic. Pure, unadulterated panic. He was losing her. No, he had never had her. She belonged to this man. He took a step forward, intending to tear them apart, to demand satisfaction. "Isolde!" he shouted, his voice cracking. She turned toward him. The smile vanished. The warmth died. She looked at him with confusion and pity. The room began to spin. The chandeliers elongated into streaks of light. The floor tilted. Sebastian felt his knees give way. The emotional shock combined with the weeks of suppressed guilt and the sudden violent realization of his own heart was too much. The great Duke of Ashford, the man of ice, collapsed to the floor in a dead faint. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Isolde not rushing to him, but turning back to Sir Johnny, her hand pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with terror, not for her husband, but for something else entirely. Ashford House. The morning after. Sebastian woke to the smell of smelling salts and the hushed murmurs of servants. He was lying on a chaise lounge in a private parlour off the ballroom, though he was now back in his own bedchamber. His head throbbed with a violence that made his vision swim. Memory returned in a jagged flash. The ball, the music, Isolde, the bow. He sat up, ignoring the protest of his valet. "Where is she?" "Her Grace is in the library." "Your Grace," the valet murmured. She has a guest." Sebastian's blood ran cold. He threw off the covers, staggering slightly as he stood. He didn't bother with the robe, marching out of his room in his shirt and trousers barefoot. He moved through the house like a storm gathering strength. He threw open the library doors. Isolde was there. She was sitting by the fire, still wearing her sapphire gown, though the morning light was beginning to bleed through the curtains. Sitting opposite her, looking grave and exhausted, was Sir Johnny Vane. They were not touching. They were not speaking. They were simply sitting in a companionable silence that spoke of a history Sebastian could not comprehend. "Get out!" Sebastian rasped, his voice raw. Isolde looked up. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "You should be resting, Sebastian. The doctor said your heart rate was dangerously elevated." "I said, get out!" Sebastian roared, pointing a shaking finger at Johnny. "You humiliate me in public, and now you bring your lover into my house before the sun is even up." Sir Johnny stood slowly. He was taller than Sebastian realized, and broader. He didn't look like a man afraid of a duke. "I am not her lover, Your Grace," Johnny said, his voice calm, baritone, and utterly steady. "I am her doctor. Do not lie to me." Sebastian advanced, his hands balled into fists. "I saw her. She bowed to you. A duchess does not bow to a butcher of a surgeon unless she is sleeping with him or he holds a secret over her head." Isolde stood up. The movement was sharp, like the snap of a whip. "He holds my life, Sebastian," she cried out. The sound was so foreign, so loud coming from her, that Sebastian stopped dead. Isolde walked toward him, her eyes blazing with a fury she had stored for 5 years. "You want to know why I bowed? You want to know who this man is?" She reached for the neckline of her gown. "Isolde, don't," Johnny warned gently. "No," she hissed. "He wants to see. Let him see." With trembling fingers, she unhooked the bodice of her gown and pulled the fabric down her left shoulder, exposing the top of her chest and the delicate skin above her heart. There, running from her collarbone down toward her breast, was a thick, jagged, silvery scar. It was an ugly mark, the sign of a wound that had been deep and desperate. Sebastian stared at it, the anger draining out of him replaced by a confused horror. What is that?" 3 years ago," Isolde said, her voice shaking with rage. "I contracted a fever. It turned into an infection of the lining of the lungs. The local doctor in Yorkshire said it was fatal. He said I had days to live. He gave me laudanum and told Mrs. Gable to measure me for a coffin." Sebastian felt the room spin again. 3 years ago. Where was I? "I telegraphed you," Isolde continued, stepping closer, forcing him to look at the scar. "Mrs. Gable sent 3 telegrams. Isolde is dying. Come at once. Did you receive them, Sebastian?" Sebastian's mind raced. 3 years ago. November. He had been in Paris. With that opera singer, Madame Renard. He had told Simmons to burn all mail from the country. He didn't want his pleasure interrupted by domestic whining. He choked. "You didn't come?" she said, pulling her dress back up with dignity. "I was drowning in my own fluids. I couldn't breathe. And then Mrs. Gable remembered a surgeon she had read about in the papers, a radical man who performed operations no one else dared. She sent for Sir Johnny." She gestured to the man standing by the fire. "He rode from London to Yorkshire in a snowstorm," Isolde said softly. "He arrived when I was grey. He cut me open on the dining room table, Sebastian. He drained the fluid. He stayed by my side for 4 days and 4 nights, squeezing air into my lungs when I was too weak to draw breath. He washed the fever sweat from my face. He held my hand when I screamed." She looked at her husband with eyes that were dry and hard as flint. "He saved me when you left me to die. So yes, Sebastian." I bowed to him. I will bow to him every day of my life until I leave this earth. And if you ever disrespect him again, I will burn this house to the ground with you inside it." Silence stretched in the library, heavy and suffocating. Sebastian looked at Sir Johnny. The surgeon wasn't gloating. He looked at Sebastian with something far worse than anger disappointment. "She is fragile, Your Grace," Johnny said quietly, picking up his medical bag. "Her lungs are still weak. Stress will kill her. I suggest you retreat to your club and leave her be." Johnny bowed to Isolde, a bow of deep respect, and walked out. Sebastian stood alone with his wife. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the stranger he had created. He saw the strength in her jaw, the sorrow in her eyes. He realized with a sickening jolt that while he had been playing the rake in Paris, she had fought a war for her life alone. "Isolde," he whispered, reaching out a hand. She didn't flinch. She just looked at his hand, as if it were a dead spider. "Do not," she said. "You forfeited the right to touch me 5 years ago. Now excuse me. I am going to bed." She walked past him. Sebastian sank into the chair she had vacated, the warmth of her body still lingering on the velvet, and put his head in his hands. London, December 1884. The scandal of the faint was managed. The newspapers were told the Duke had suffered a bout of exhaustion due to his parliamentary duties. But inside Ashford House, the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Sebastian stopped drinking. He stopped going to his clubs. He stopped seeing his mistresses. He became a ghost in his own home, haunting the hallways, waiting for a glimpse of her. He was trying to court his wife. It was a pathetic, clumsy display. He had never courted anyone in his life. Women had always thrown themselves at his title. He didn't know how to pursue a woman who despised him. He started with gifts. On a Tuesday, a massive bouquet of white lilies arrived for her. Isolde told the maid to take them to the local church. "I dislike lilies," she told the maid, loud enough for Sebastian to hear from the hallway. "They smell of funerals." On Thursday, he left a diamond bracelet on her vanity. He found it on his own pillow that night, unworn. He tried conversation. At dinner, which they still took together in excruciating formality, he tried to ask about her day. "I see you went to the park," he said, cutting his pheasant. "Yes. Was it pleasant?" "It was cold." "Isolde, please," he snapped, dropping his fork. "I'm trying." She looked up, her eyes unreadable. "Trying to do what Sebastian assuage your guilt. You cannot buy 5 years with a bracelet and polite conversation." "I want to know you," he said, his voice lowering. I realized I don't know who you are." "You had your chance," she said, sipping her wine. "I'm not a book you can pick up off the shelf whenever you are bored." But Sebastian was stubborn. The arrogance that had made him a bad husband now made him a relentless suitor. If she wouldn't talk to him, he would find out about her from others. He began to track her movements. He discovered she left the house every Tuesday and Friday morning, dressed in simple wool, taking a hackney cab rather than the ducal carriage. One Friday in mid-December, he followed her. He expected her to go to a lover's house. He expected to catch her with Johnny Vane. Instead, the cab took her to the East End of London, Whitechapel. Sebastian watched from his own carriage, horrified as his duchess stepped out into the filth and grime of the slum. She walked with purpose down a narrow alleyway and entered a dilapidated building with a peeling sign, St. Jude's Clinic for Women and Children. Sebastian waited for 10 minutes, then followed. Inside, the smell of carbolic acid and poverty was overwhelming. The clinic was crowded with women in rags, coughing children, and the destitute. And there, in the center of the chaos, was Isolde. She had removed her hat and gloves. She was wearing a white apron over her dress. She was holding a crying infant, rocking it gently, while speaking to a terrified young mother. "He needs clean milk," Isolde was saying, her voice soft and authoritative. "And warmth. Here." She reached into her pocket and pulled out several coins. "Go to the grocer on the corner. Tell him Mrs. Sterling sent you." Mrs. Sterling? She used her maiden name. Sebastian watched, mesmerized. She wasn't the ice queen here. She was warm, tactile, laughing with the children, wiping dirt from faces. She was radiant. "She has a gift, does she not?" Sebastian jumped. Sir Johnny Vane was standing beside him, wiping his hands on a towel. He didn't look surprised to see the Duke. "You allow her to come here," Sebastian whispered. "It's dangerous. The disease, the crime." "I do not allow her to do anything," Johnny said pointedly. "She founded this place. Her money, the money she saved from the household accounts you ignored, pays for the medicine. She pays the rent." Johnny looked at Sebastian. "She comes here because here she is useful. Here she is seen. At your house, she is just a decoration." Sebastian felt the sting of the truth. "She loves you," he said, the words tasting like ash. Johnny sighed. "She loves that I see her. She loves that I saved her. But she is a woman of honor, Ashford. She takes her vows seriously. More seriously than you ever did." Johnny stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "But know this. I am a patient man. I am waiting. If you hurt her again, if you neglect her again, she will leave you, and I will be there to catch her. And unlike you, I will never let her go." Johnny turned and walked back to his patients. Sebastian stood in the doorway for a long time, watching his wife soothe a feverish child. He saw the tenderness in her hands he had never held. He realized then that he didn't just want her forgiveness. He was falling in love with her. And it was the most terrifying feeling he had ever known, because he knew with absolute certainty that he did not deserve her. That evening, Isolde returned to Ashford House exhausted. She went straight to her room to change. When she came down for dinner, she found the dining room empty. "Where is the Duke?" she asked Simmons. "He is in the library, Your Grace. He asked that you join him." Isolde sighed. Another confrontation. She walked to the library, steeling herself. When she entered, she stopped. The room had been changed. The heavy, dark curtains were pulled back. The desk was covered not with brandy bottles and ledgers, but with books. Her books. The ones on agricultural reform, on poetry, on history. Sebastian was standing by the fireplace. He looked nervous. "I didn't order dinner," he said. "I see." "I thought." He gestured to a small table set up by the fire. On it was a simple pot of tea bread and cheese. "I thought you might be tired of heavy meals. I know you prefer a light supper after your work." Isolde stiffened. "You followed me." "Yes." "Are you going to forbid me from going?" she asked, her chin going up. "Are you going to tell me it is unseemly for a duchess to touch the poor—" "No," Sebastian said. He walked toward her, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm going to write a check." He picked up a piece of paper from the table and handed it to her. It was a bank draft. The amount was staggering. £5,000. "For St. Jude's," he said. "The roof looked like it was leaking, and Vane needs better surgical tools." Isolde stared at the check. Her hands shook. She looked up at him, searching for the trick, the mockery. "Why?" she asked. "Because it matters to you," Sebastian said simply. "And because I saw you today. I saw you holding that hot child, and I realized that I have been blind for 5 years." He took a deep breath. "I am not asking for forgiveness, Isolde. I know I cannot buy it. But I am asking for a truce. Let me help you. Let me help your clinic. I have influence in Parliament. I can get laws changed for the poor. I can do more than write checks. Use me. Use my title. Use my power. I give it all to you." Isolde looked at the check, then at him. The ice in her eyes didn't melt, but it cracked. For the first time, she looked at him not as an enemy, but as a puzzle. "You would help Johnny?" she asked, testing him. Sebastian flinched at the name, but he nodded. "If he helps you, yes." Isolde folded the check and placed it in her pocket. "Very well, Sebastian," she said softly. "We have a truce. But do not think this makes us husband and wife." "I know," Sebastian said. "I am willing to wait." "Good," she said, turning to leave, "because you will be waiting a long time." As she left the room, Sebastian sank against the desk. It was a small victory, a tiny crumb. But it was a start. However, fate and the drama of high society was not done with them yet. For just as Sebastian began to build a bridge, the past was about to arrive on their doorstep to burn it down. January 1885. The truce between the Duke and Duchess was fragile like a layer of new ice over a deep river. It held, but beneath it, the currents of the past still swirled. London was beginning to talk. The cold Duke was no longer cold. He was seen escorting his wife to the museum, walking with her in Hyde Park, walking not riding, and most shockingly, sitting in the public gallery of the House of Lords while she met with committee members regarding the poor laws. Sebastian was a man possessed. He had fallen in love with his wife, with the same intensity with which he had once ignored her. He was attentive, protective, and desperately seeking a smile that wasn't guarded. But the past is a greedy creditor. It always comes to collect. It happened at the Royal Opera House. It was the premiere of Carmen. Sebastian had secured a private box hoping to impress Isolde. She looked ethereal in a gown of emerald green silk, the color bringing out the gold in her hazel eyes. For the first time in weeks, she seemed relaxed. She even laughed at a comment he made about the tenor's moustache. "You are enjoying yourself," Sebastian said, leaning close to her as the lights dimmed for the intermission. "It is better than I expected," Isolde admitted, glancing at him. "You have surprised me, Sebastian. You have been consistent." "I intend to be consistent for the rest of my life," he murmured, taking her gloved hand. She didn't pull away. Then the curtain of their box was swept aside. "Bastien, darling, I heard you were here." The voice was shrill, French, and perfumed with heavy rose oil. Standing there was Madame Clara Renard. She was dressed in scarlet, dripping in diamonds. Sebastian had paid for years ago. The air in the box froze. Isolde stiffened. She pulled her hand from Sebastian's grip as if burned. "Clara," Sebastian said, standing up, his face darkening. "You are not welcome here." "Not welcome." Clara laughed, stepping into the box, ignoring the gasps from the audience below, who were turning their opera glasses toward the commotion. "But you welcomed me so warmly in Paris, chérie. Don't tell me you've forgotten the nights at the Rue de Rivoli. the way you read my letters while your little country mouse sent you telegrams?" Isolde went pale. She looked at Sebastian. "Telegrams!" Clara's eyes flashed with malice. She saw the weakness and struck. "Oh, did he not tell you, Duchess? We were in bed when the telegram came, the one about you dying." Bastian laughed. He said, "She is just seeking attention." He threw it in the fire. It was a lie. Sebastian had never received the telegrams. His valet had burned them, on Clara's orders, a fact he had only recently discovered. But Isolde didn't know that. Isolde looked at Sebastian. The fragile trust they had built shattered instantly. The horror on her face was absolute. "Is this true?" she whispered. "You received them. You laughed." "No." Sebastian grabbed her arm. "Isolde, listen to me. That is a lie. I never saw them. She is lying. He is a duke," Clara sneered. "He lies to everyone. He told me he loved me. He told me you were nothing." Isolde stood up. She was trembling so violently that the emeralds on her neck rattled. The stress, the shock, and the stale air of the opera house triggered the one thing she feared most. Her breath hitched. A wheezing sound, dry and terrifying, escaped her throat. She clutched her chest. "Isolde!" Sebastian shoved Clara aside, not caring that she fell against the wall. He caught his wife just as her knees buckled. "I can't," Isolde gasped, her face turning blue. "Air!" "Get out of my way!" Sebastian roared at the crowd gathering at the door. He scooped Isolde into his arms. She felt terrifyingly light. He ran. The Duke of Ashford ran through the gilded corridors of the opera house, carrying his dying wife, tears streaming down his face. He burst out into the cold January night, shouting for his carriage. "Home!" he screamed at the driver. "Drive like the devil himself is chasing us!" Inside the carriage, Isolde was fighting for every breath. Her lungs, scarred and weak, were seizing up. "Hold on," Sebastian begged, rocking her, pressing his own breath against her cheek. "I didn't know, Isolde. I swear on my life I didn't know. Please don't leave me. Not now. Not when I've just found you." Isolde looked at him, her eyes dimming. She wanted to believe him, but the pain was too great. The darkness was closing in. Her hand went limp in his. Ashford House, London. 3 days later. The silence on Grosvenor Square was unnatural. By order of the household, fresh straw had been laid thick upon the cobblestones outside Ashford House to dampen the clatter of carriage wheels and the iron shoes of horses. It was a universal signal in London society, a grim semaphore that spoke without words. Someone inside is dying. Inside the great house, the silence was even heavier. The servants moved like wraiths, their footsteps swallowed by plush carpets, speaking only in whispers. The usual hum of a ducal estate, the polishing of silver, the ringing of bells had ceased. The house held its breath, waiting for the final exhale of its mistress. In the master bedchamber, the air was stiflingly hot. A roaring fire had been kept burning for 72 hours straight, an attempt to keep the chill from settling into the Duchess's weakened lungs. The room smelled of camphor burning coal, and the metallic tang of fear. Sebastian St. Clair, the 9th Duke of Ashford, sat in a wing-back chair, pulled aggressively close to the bedside. To anyone who had seen him at the opera 3 days ago, arrogant, polished, untouchable, he was now unrecognizable. He had not shaved. A dark shadow of stubble covered his jaw. His linen shirt was unbuttoned at the throat, the cravat long since discarded on the floor. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, sunk deep into a face that had turned the color of parchment. He looked less like a duke and more like a man serving a penance in purgatory. He held Isolde's hand. Her skin was terrifyingly dry, the fever burning beneath the surface like a subterranean fire. "Breathe," Sebastian whispered. It was a command he had repeated 1,000 times in the last 3 days. "Just breathe, damn you." On the bed, Isolde was a small shape beneath the heavy quilts. Her breathing was the only sound in the room, a wet, rattling rasp that sounded like dry leaves scraping across stone. Every inhalation was a struggle, a battle against the fluid rising in her scarred lungs. Sir Johnny Vane stood by the window, staring out at the grey London sky. The surgeon's broad shoulders were slumped. He had spent the last 2 nights awake, administering drafts of digitalis and steaming the room with eucalyptus, but his medical bag now sat closed on the table. Sebastian felt the change in the room's energy. He looked up, his voice cracking. "Why have you stopped?" Johnny turned slowly. His face was etched with exhaustion and a profound professional sorrow. "Because there is nothing left to mix, Your Grace. The medicine is in her blood. Now it is a matter of physiology." "She is fighting," Sebastian insisted, tightening his grip on her limp hand. "I can feel her fighting." "Is she?" Johnny walked to the foot of the bed, looking down at the woman he had saved once before. "The body follows the mind, Ashford. Medicine can repair tissue, it can purge infection, but it cannot force a heart to beat if the spirit has already let go." Sebastian stood up the chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that 3 years ago, she survived a death sentence because she was fueled by rage," Johnny said, his voice calm but hard. "She wanted to live to spite the husband who abandoned her. She wanted to prove she could stand without you. That anger was a fire that burned the sickness out." Johnny met Sebastian's gaze, and for the first time he didn't hide his disdain. "But now, what fuel does she have? She believes the man she was beginning to trust mocked her dying plea. She believes her marriage is a lie, her life a joke to you and your mistress. She is tired, Sebastian, and when a patient with lungs this comprised decides they are tired, the end comes very quickly." Sebastian felt as if he had been struck in the chest. "I didn't mock her," he rasped, the denial tasting like ash. "You know I didn't. I never saw those telegrams. Clara lied." "I believe you," Johnny said softly, "but I am not the one dying. She cannot hear your defense. She is trapped in the dark with that woman's voice in her ear." "Then I will go into the dark and get her," Sebastian vowed. "You can try." Johnny picked up his hat. "I am going to the clinic to retrieve a stronger stimulant, though I fear it may be too late. I will return in 2 hours. Until then, you are her only doctor." Johnny paused at the door, looking back at the broken Duke. "Talk to her, Ashford, if there is any truth in you. Any love that isn't just guilt dressed up in finery. Give it to her now. It is the only thing that might pull her back." The door clicked shut. Sebastian was alone. The room seemed to shrink, the shadows in the corners, stretching like grasping fingers. The rattle in Isolde's chest grew louder, a terrible rhythmic countdown. Sebastian sank to his knees beside the bed. The physical position was foreign to him. Dukes did not kneel. But Sebastian St. Clair was no longer a duke. He was a beggar. He pressed his forehead against the back of her hand. It was burning hot. "Isolde?" he whispered. There was no response. not even a flicker of an eyelid. "You have to listen to me," he began, his voice trembling. "I know you think I am a monster, and perhaps I am. I married you and locked you away because I was too selfish to share my life. I was a boy, playing at being a man, thinking that freedom meant having no responsibilities." He lifted his head, staring at her pale face. He traced the line of her jaw with a shaking finger. "I thought you were weak," he confessed, the tears finally spilling over. "When I saw you on our wedding day trembling in that lace dress, I thought you were nothing but a burden, a paper doll I had to carry. God, how wrong I was." He let out a shuddering breath. "You are the strongest thing I have ever known. You rebuilt an estate while I gambled in Paris. You saved children in Whitechapel while I drank in my club. You cut open your own chest to survive while I slept in a warm bed." The image of her scar, that jagged, silvery line, flashed in his mind. It was a map of his failure. "Clara lied," he said, his voice dropping to a fierce, desperate whisper. "I never saw the telegrams. I swear it on my mother's grave, on my own soul. If I had known you were in pain, I would have burned Paris to the ground to get to you. I would have ridden until the horse died under me." Isolde's breathing hitched, a long, terrifying pause between breaths. Sebastian froze. "No," he commanded, panic rising in his throat. "No, you do not stop. Breathe." She drew in a shallow gasp, the sound wet and agonizing. Sebastian leaned closer, bringing his face inches from hers. He needed her to feel his breath, his life force. "Do not give her the satisfaction," he snarled through his tears. "Do not let that lie be the last thing you hear. Do not let me win by being the widower who mourns you. Punish me, Isolde. Live and punish me. Make me wait on you. Make me suffer. Ignore me for 50 years. I will take any torture you give me, as long as you are in the world." He buried his face in the sheets next to her arm. "I love you," he sobbed, the words ripping out of him. "I didn't know what it was until I saw you bow to another man and felt my heart stop. I love your mind. I love your anger. I love the way you look at the rain. I am in love with you, and I am terrified." The room went silent. Sebastian stopped breathing. He waited for the rattle. It didn't come. A scream built in his throat. "She's gone. I've killed her." Then a sound, a soft shuddering sigh, not the jagged rasp of illness, but a deep, clearing exhale. Sebastian's head snapped up. Isolde's chest rose. It fell. Then it rose again, slowly but deeply. The rhythm had changed. The frantic, shallow struggle had broken, replaced by the heavy, exhausted sleep of the living. And then her hand moved. It was barely a tremor, a mere twitch of the fingers against his tear-dampened cheek. Sebastian froze, afraid that if he moved, he would shatter the miracle. Slowly, painfully, Isolde's eyelids fluttered. They were heavy, weighed down by days of fever, but they opened. The hazel irises were glassy and unfocused, rolling slightly as she tried to find an anchor in the room. They found him. She looked at the wreck of a man kneeling by her bed. She saw the stubble, the red eyes, the raw, unfiltered agony on his face. She saw the cold Duke stripped bare. Her lips parted. Her throat was dry, her voice a ghost of a sound. "You!" Sebastian leaned in, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "I am here. I am right here." Isolde swallowed, wincing at the pain in her throat. Her gaze drifted around the room, seeing the fire, the darkness, and then returning to him. "You cried," she whispered. The words were barely audible, but to Sebastian they were a shout. He let out a wet, shaky laugh, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "Yes, I cried. I seem to be doing a great deal of that lately." "Clara," she breathed the name, causing her brow to furrow in distress. "Liar," Sebastian said, firmly gripping her hand. "She is a liar. I never knew Isolde. I never knew you were sick. I never laughed. I was a fool, but I was never that cruel. You must believe me." Isolde looked at him. In the dim light, truth has a way of shining brighter than gold. She searched his face for the deception she had expected for 5 years. She looked for the arrogance, the dismissal. She found only fear and love. The tension in her body released. She closed her eyes again, a single tear slipping out to track through the sweat on her temple. "I heard you," she murmured. Sebastian stilled. "You heard me about the paper doll." Her lips curved in the faintest, weakest shadow of a smile. "And the riding until the horse died." Sebastian lowered his head, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture of absolute reverence. "I would have. I will. Every day." "Don't let me go, Sebastian," she whispered, her voice fading as exhaustion pulled her back under. But this time, it was not the darkness of death, but the healing embrace of sleep. "I am so tired." "Sleep," he commanded, gently brushing a damp lock of hair from her forehead. "I have you. I will hold you. The walls could fall down around us, and I would not let you go." Isolde's breathing evened out into a steady, rhythmic slumber. Sebastian did not move. He did not call for the nurse. He did not ring for the valet. He stayed on his knees, holding his wife's hand, watching the rise and fall of her chest, as if it were the only wonder in the world. An hour later, when the first grey light of dawn began to bleed through the heavy velvet curtains, the door opened. Sir Johnny Vane stepped in a vial of medicine in his hand, his face braced for the worst. He looked at the bed. He saw the sleeping Duchess. He saw the colour returning faint but real to her cheeks, and he saw the Duke still kneeling awake and vigilant, a sentinel guarding his treasure. Sebastian turned to the doctor. He didn't speak. He just nodded. Johnny let out a long breath, his shoulders dropping. He placed the vial in his pocket. He didn't need it. "Well done, Your Grace," Johnny whispered. Sebastian looked back at his wife. "She did the work, Doctor. I just held the light." Outside, the city of London began to wake up. But inside Ashford House, the long winter was finally over. The ice had not just melted, it had been shattered, leaving behind something raw, tender, and undeniably alive. And that is the story of the Duke of Ashford and the bride he almost lost. It's a reminder that apologies are cheap, but change is expensive. It costs pride time and ego. Sebastian St. Clair had to break his own heart to fix the one he damaged. If you enjoyed this story of redemption angst and undying love, please hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a tale. I want to know, do you think Isolde forgave him too easily, or did Sebastian do enough to earn his second chance? Let me know in the comments down below. I read every single one. Until next time, keep the romance alive.